Hello, welcome to News Round, a recap of stories in the week. I'm Laddie Williams. Now here are the headlines. President Buhari fails to honor the invitation of the House of Representatives to discuss the insecurity challenge in the country. And Senate promises to conclude amendment of electoral laws by Q1 2021. And this week, 90-year-old Margaret Keenan received the first shot of the UK-approved Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine. And News Round begins with the president's failure to honor the invitation of the House of Representatives, where he was scheduled to address lawmakers on what he's doing about the insecurity in the country. His absence triggered reactions from the lawmakers at plenary, with some of them insisting that the invitation is still open and that the president has not disrespected the National Assembly.
It's Thursday, the day President Muhammadu Buhari is expected to honor the invitation of the House of Representatives to brief lawmakers on the security situation in the country. There is no unusual activity in the lobby of the National Assembly, no security adjustments, and no presence of the president's security detail, all suggesting that the president may not be making an appearance. This is confirmed when plenary commences and a lawmaker raises a point of order on breach of his privilege.
Before we commence any business of this House today, we ought to be addressed on what has happened to that resolution. The entire public is watching. The whole country is watching. They want to see the response of this House to such a flagrant disrespect of a resolution that was passed here on the floor of this House.
Your point of privilege is noted. The channels of communication procedural, and we will await for official communication from Mr. President as opposed to newspaper reports.
And just like that, it's back to business as usual in the Green Chamber. For some Nigerians, however, the president's absence is no surprise, considering reports that APC governors were opposed to the invitation, and a statement from the Attorney General of the Federation had suggested same. The AGF had quoted Section 218, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which states that the management and control of the security sector is exclusively vested in the president as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, including the power to determine the operational use of the armed forces. The AGF, relying on that section, further posited that an invitation that seeks to put the operational use of the armed forces to a public interrogation is indeed taking the constitutional right of lawmaking beyond bounds. In a counter-statement, the Deputy Minority Leader of the House, who is also a lawyer, quoted Section 89, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which empowers the Senate or the House of Representatives or a committee appointed in accordance with Section 62 of the Constitution to procure evidence, written or oral, and to summon any person in Nigeria to give evidence at any place. Following the disappointing turn of events, this is how lawmakers reacted.
We said, okay, he will come on Thursday, but we didn't even get the communication to say he has agreed that Thursday is a good date for him to come.
I'm also going to enjoin my colleagues to demand a fundamental and unequivocal apology from the Attorney General and from Mr. President himself for not allowing himself to be advised properly. I am going to suggest we suspend any deliberation on the budget until this apology is received.
There's no breach at all, absolutely. It's just people are insinuating so many things which they don't know. We have written, there was a motion, there was a resolution, the resolution was communicated to the executive. The executive have indicated their interest in sharing some concerns, national concerns with the parliament, and then we're waiting for the president to communicate with us officially, and I'm sure he will.
The situation is a little confusing for many. The president's personal assistant on social media, Loretta Onochie, had tweeted the president's decision to honor the invitation on the 10th of December. That was days after the Speaker of the House of Representatives, after a meeting with the president, confirmed his appearance. The entire country now awaits the official communication from the president to explain why he failed to honor the invitation of the House of Representatives, especially because the Constitution empowers the National Assembly to invite any citizen, including the president. Attention will also now turn to the House of Representatives to see how they will react, especially to protect the sanctity of the House of Representatives and the National Assembly in general. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Senate President, Ahmed Lawan, has given the assurance that the National Assembly will amend the Electoral Act before the end of the first quarter of 2021. Senator Lawan made the promise at a public hearing on the bill for an act to repeal the Electoral Act 2010 and enactment of the Independent National Electoral Commission Act of 2020.
Assembly has started another process of amending the country's electoral laws.
Our proposed amendment says...
And this public hearing, organized by the Senate and House of Representatives Joint Committee on INEC, is one of the processes to enact the new legislation. There was a previous attempt by the 8th Assembly to amend the electoral law before the 2019 elections. However, President Buhari refused to sign the bill into law on the premise of the closeness to the 2019 general elections. The ongoing 9th Assembly insists it will amend the Electoral Act in good time ahead of the 2023 general elections.
And the Electoral Act amendment is one of those targets that, by the grace of God, will work so hard to pass before the end of the first quarter of next year.
These Nigerians from different organizations gathered in this hall want an improvement of the electoral legal framework, and the bill in focus proposes an amendment of over 300 clauses expected to promote free, fair and credible elections. Some of the proposed amendments in the bill include: the Commission may adopt electronic voting or any other method of voting in any election it conducts as it deems fit. The presiding officer shall use a smart card reader or any other technological device that may be prescribed by the Commission to accredit voters. Where a smart card deployed for accreditation of voters fails to function in any polling unit, a fresh card reader must be provided. Where a fresh card reader is not deployed, the election in that unit shall be cancelled and another election shall be scheduled within 24 hours.
We also have concerns that the electoral legal framework on certain issues should be well settled ahead of the 2023 elections, such as the use of technological devices like the card reader and electronic voting system, criteria for substitution of candidates, etc.
The other issue is the issue of Section 252 regarding electronics voting. I think I would like to see a further amendment to that provision to be more comprehensive, to give INEC powers for the electronic management of the election. This will include the verification, the joint verification of voters, the voting, and of course the transmission. In the US, which we have been trying to copy over the years, election starts from long before the actual election day. I think this amendment should include something that gives that kind of picture. Nigerians can vote from their homes. Nigerians can vote by mail.
There have been consistent calls for Nigeria to reform its electoral process. As many have said, credible elections will promote political stability and deepen democracy. Linda Akibi, Channels.
And still in electoral matters, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu has retained his seat and has been sworn in as chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission for a second term of 5 years. The exercise, which held in the council chambers of the presidential villa, was administered by President Muhammadu Buhari, who reappointed him as chairman of INEC on October the 27th. The swearing-in was performed just before the commencement of the 27th Federal Executive Council meeting, where a minute's silence was observed for a military officer, General Domket Bali, who served the country as Minister of Defense. He died last week at the age of 80.
It's a big responsibility. It's historic. No Nigerian has been so privileged to serve as chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission twice, and it's a responsibility I'm going to discharge consistent with the oath of office I took and my allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What should Nigerians expect? We have clearly demonstrated in recent elections that elections are getting better and better, and the elections will continue to get better and better. By coincidence today, the National Assembly is holding a public hearing on the amendment of the electoral legal framework. This is important, and this time around, working with the National Assembly will ensure the speedy passage of the amendment bill, and once it is assented to, it will help us enormously in confronting the challenges ahead. The preparations for the 2023 general elections have proceeded in earnest. We need certainty, and therefore the electoral legal framework is fundamental, without which we cannot formulate our regulations and guidelines. Without our regulations and guidelines, we cannot conclude work on the manual for the training of ad hoc staff for the elections. So from here, I am going to proceed to the National Assembly. So work begins in earnest, and we have already started.
And President Muhammad Buhari says Nigerians have the right to a peaceful protest, but the protest should be done within the laws of the land. The President made the clarification at the virtual opening of the Chief of Army Staff Annual Conference 2020 and commissioning of the Nigerian Army Cyber Warfare Command building in Abuja, the nation's capital. The President commends the Army for its doggedness in curbing the activities of insurgents in the country.
Officers and men of the Nigerian Army, as well as government officials, are gathered for the annual Chief of Staff Conference and commissioning of some projects initiated by the Chief of Army Staff. The purpose of the conference is to appraise the performance of the Army yearly and projects for next year. The President, who joined the conference virtually, says a peaceful protest was allowed in the country, but gave a stern warning to those who want to create havoc.
I also wish to state that any act of hooliganism behind lawful and peaceful protests will be dealt with decisively to ensure the peace and stability of our nation.
The President commends the Army for being resolute in the discharge of their duties.
Let me also use this opportunity to commend the Army for its unwavering commitment towards curtailing the activities of insurgents, armed bandits, kidnappers, cattle rustlers, and other violent criminals.
The Minister of Defense also shares the President's thoughts.
The armed forces of Nigeria and the Nigerian Army in particular have been in the forefront of efforts to restore peace in the country. In this regard, I commend the efforts of the Nigerian Army in the Northeast, which have led to a gradual return of internally displaced persons to their communities in furtherance of the settlement plans of the Borno State government.
The Nigerian Army lists its achievements for the year 2020, despite the enormous challenges it encountered.
Within the period under review, the Nigerian Army embarked on massive infrastructural development, undertook further force restructuring, conducted several local and overseas training, carried out various operations, as well as optimized logistics and its support elements, amongst others.
The commissioning of the Nigerian Cyber Warfare Command is poised to be a leading player in the cyberspace worldwide, as it can monitor field operations of its personnel from anywhere.
When News Round returns, we look at NSAS protests that resumed in Osogbo and Lagos. That's in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching News Round. And in exercising their rights to protest, some youths in Osun State took to the streets as they made good their plans to resume the NSAS protests. They marched through some major streets of Osogbo and gathered at the State House of Assembly, where they made their demands. The protest could not hold in Lagos, Abuja and Abeokuta as there were preemptive measures by security agencies.
Some youths in Oshogbo, the Osun State capital, made good their plan to resume the NSAS protests today.
Many need did they use to speak about the falling?
A few numbers of protesters marched to the State House of Assembly, demanding to meet with the leadership of the lawmaking arm of government.
What they form in Osun State, to me, is not judicial panel of inquiry. It's just a political panel of inquiries. The second one, they said we will have town hall meeting with the governor. But the town hall meeting was political party. It's not a meeting, it was a party. Because a town hall meeting whereby they did not allow any of the NSAS movement to come in.
Meanwhile, the police in Ogun State seem poised to avoid being taken unawares as they hit the streets of the state capital, Abeokuta, to ensure that there's no breakdown of law and order in the state. Police and other security operators stayed on alert at strategic locations at the state capital to stop the protest.
I believe that those who are planning this protest, they are nothing but unscrupulous elements who are always derive pleasure in a troubled environment. And we have let them know that the command will not tolerate any form of protest for now.
And in Lagos, the epicenter of the NSAS protest, security operatives are stationed at Lekki Plaza to forestall the resumption of demonstration at the scene. The youth had used the open ground at the Lekki toll gate as one of the protest points in Lagos for about 2 weeks until October the 20th, when soldiers invaded the area and shot at protesters.
Organization is today.
The National Association of the Nigerian Students is asking its members to stay away from any fresh protests.
Any protest that is faceless, National Association of Nigerian Students, under my watch, will not be part to it.
The association also appealed to the Academic Staff Union of Universities to resolve their differences with the federal government in order to end the industrial action that is keeping Nigerian students at home.
And now to health matters. With 796 new cases of COVID-19 in the country, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has warned that Nigeria may be on the verge of a second wave of the pandemic, with surging cases across the states in the last few weeks. PTF Chairman and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, explains that there is a rise in the number of cases in 23 states, as 4 states, Lagos, Rivers, Ogun State, and FCT now have the highest case count. The PTF also plans to make an initial purchase of 20 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine in 2021.
As the countdown begins to mark the end of the weekly briefings by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Nigerians may have to begin counting down the days until the possibility of a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We may well be at the verge of that second wave of this pandemic. In the past 24 hours, we have had 474 confirmed cases and 2 fatalities, with an indication that this week's figures will be higher than last week's.
In a summary, the PTF chairman, Boss Mustafa, notes that there was an uptick in 23 states. 12 states, including Sokoto, Osun, Edo, Nasarawa, Kwara, Delta, among others, had a 100% increase. By implication, Kaduna, Lagos, and the FCT have recorded alarming levels of case count.
States that have not reported a case in at least 1 week are Abia, Adamawa, Ebonyi, Cross River, Ondo, Niger, and Yobe. One assurance we wish to give is that any vaccine that will be approved for Nigeria will be endorsed by the World Health Organization and must be certified safe for Nigerians to use by our research and scientific bodies.
The PTF is also looking to advance a compelling case for the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines within the budget as it plans to roll out 20 million doses in 2021.
It's good to set aside, to speak with the National Assembly to set aside a certain amount. Not that we know exactly what it's going to cost, but to have something to start with when the need comes. I want to start with at least 20 million doses, which we are expecting from the COVAX facility to cover the mostly those who are, beginning with those who are working in the health sector.
As the task force further raised deep concerns over the flouting of COVID-19 protocols by religious organizations, describing their activities as a sabotage, they have promised to significantly scale up enforcement. In 2 weeks, the PTF is looking to submit its final report to the president. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
And that's it on News Round. Thank you for watching. I'm Ladi Williams.